What's up, y'all? It's Izzy, and hopefully the electrical video will be able to come out for the end of this week. But there's just been some odds and ends things that I've been trying to fix up, trying to do, and of course I can't get out there today. That was my plan, to go out there and film today. But if I went out there and filmed, all you would hear was rain on the tin roof because it is pouring down, and I didn't look ahead to the weather, I'm not gonna lie. And I spent the whole day in here yesterday when it was beautiful outside. Beautiful. It was kind of cloudy. But cleaning my room. So needed to do that, but should have went outside and filmed instead. Then I wouldn't be back here where I hate filming. We're going to talk a little bit today about DC versus AC. So I mentioned this a little bit in my electrical mat video, but I feel like that one was very poorly filmed, and that was on me. That's an awful video. One day I will redo that video, but I'm trying to keep up my consistency, so I don't want to lose my streak, because then it would just make me bog down and be sad. But anywho's, so in a bus, in a Skoolie, in an RV, in a camper, you can basically work your appliances in so that you could wire everything through direct current, or DC, also known as 12 volt. But you can't do everything in AC because, like in a motorhome and an RV, it is a motor vehicle, so there's going to be a lot of 12 volt elements already involved within doing electrical, I guess I should say. And there are some things that you can't get, but I don't think you can get 110s for. Like, there's just several things. It would be nice just to go ahead and be more convenient to have a 12 volt system in there, and so that's why, like, if you buy an RV panel, it has both 12 volt and 110 or 120, whatever you want to call it, in there. So let's go in and break down a little bit more what I mean when I say like DC versus AC. So as I've already discussed just a little bit, DC current is direct current. So that means the current is coming through one wire straight to the application, the element, yeah, directly to. That's what it means, directly to. Now, this is the kind of power that you're going to get from batteries, from solar, because of course your solar charges your battery. So yeah, you get it from your batteries, and that's why it's often used in automobiles, because where else would the car get a battery from, like, get power from besides a battery? But yeah, that's where I was going with that. There's also several appliances that you can get to go along with DC, but one of the main things, like in my bus, the major things that I feel like was just easier to run on 12 volt were my puck lights, like my overall lights, because the bus already came with 4 lights that was already running on 12 volt, so I just wanted to re-implement those. So I thought, while I'm doing that, I might as well go ahead and use the other ones that are 12 volt. Saying that, those are the lights that I'm not going to have on often, so I'm not going to have like a big battery storage or anything like that, so take that into consideration. There's a lot of things to take into consideration, but I'll cover more on various topics later on, so it should help you make make better decisions, maybe make more detailed decisions if you're looking into, should I do this in this, or should I do it in that. Basically, though, if you have direct current in your bus, you're going to have a battery specifically for that direct current. You could run it off of your bus battery, but I wouldn't recommend doing that unless you're going to be moving a lot, because what you might find yourself doing is draining the battery in your bus, and that wouldn't be any good, because then you can't start it, and then you can't go anywhere, and then you're sitting on the side of the road dead. So yeah, wouldn't recommend it. And then with direct current, anytime you run a line with direct current, well, it's any with any electricity, but with direct current specifically, if you run a wire, you're going to have to run 2 wires to whatever you run a wire to. One that is going to be your hot wire, or the wire that gives your device electricity, and the other one's going to have to be a grounding wire. Now, I'll talk a little bit more, I'll do a specific video just on grounding, because I feel like it's a point that some people might pass up if I didn't otherwise state it. But if you do not, that's my lights. If you do not ground your lights, it will be quite a shocking experience for you. And I know it sounds really scary in the fact of saying, okay, I have to ground my lights to the box, and then I have to ground my lights to the bus. So that's probably going to be one of your easiest options if you're running 12 volt. You can very well run a wire all the way back to grounding to the box, but if you don't have a lot of wire, if you're trying to save and cut down on the wires that you're running in the mess, it would just be just as easy to run a wire straight from your device, or whatever your ground wire. Maybe your device already comes with a ground wire, which it should. Yeah, if it's a 12 volt, and you just run that ground wire straight to like one of the metal beams on your bus, and you can use like a self-tapping screw to put it into the bus, and you can wrap that wire around that, and that'll ground your light. That way if you go to touch it or you touch the bus, you're not going to get shocked from that. And I know that sounds counterproductive, grounding electricity to the bus and then saying that you're not going to get shocked by touching the bus, but that's how it's supposed to work. And like I said, I'll talk about that more later in a very specific video. Now, if you're going to go with DC power, unlike AC power, which I'll talk about in a minute, DC powers have fuses. So they're little like key things, and I'll put some, I hope I'm putting graphics over here to help explain things as I'm doing it, because sometimes I get lazy, but I hope I am putting graphics. But they're like little kind of like, they're almost like a plasticky on the front, and then they have two little prongs, and they just kind of plug into your load center or your breaker box, whatever you want to call it. It's not really a breaker box if it's fuses, it's a fuse box, isn't it? Yep, yeah, it is. The fuse, if something was to happen, unlike a breaker, like a normal breaker, it won't flip, it will melt. So you have to replace the fuse if something was to happen and the fuse was to go out. But their fuses aren't that expensive. So now I think I've covered basically all we need for DC, and I hope that I'm doing this productively because I don't have a script, but even when I do have a script, it still is all over the place anyways. So let's move a little bit along to AC. Now, AC current is commonly known as like 110 or 120. The reason that is like over time it has gone up in voltage. I think we call it 110, but it's actually truly 120 volts. AC is what's going to be called like your house current. That's the current that you have in your house. It's an alternating current. So when you're wiring it up, you will kind of understand a little bit more about what I'm talking about. So with AC, you have three wires. You have your hot wire, your ground wire, and your neutral wire. And what happens is that the electricity alternates between the two, so that's why you have two wires. I think that I'm saying that right. Electricians out there are probably going to be like, ooh, ooh. When you're wiring AC, that doesn't get you out of having to ground it to the bus either. You're going to have to end up grounding the AC wires to the bus. Now, specifically outlets, lights, and all that, they have a specific place for ground wires to connect to. All your ground wires for your AC are indefinitely going to your box or your load center. And then your load center will end up getting grounded to the bus, and that's how all of your AC wires will end up being grounded. So as I said before, DC uses fuses, AC uses breakers. That's probably what you're more familiar with, especially if you live in a home, because you have a breaker box. So breaker boxes and load centers I'll talk about, like breaker boxes, breakers, load centers, all of that I'll talk about in a different time. But basically AC uses breakers. If you order an RV electrical box, like especially like I'll link the one below that I ended up ordering, but you can opt into ordering the breakers with the load center, but just know you can buy those straight out at Lowe's as well. So like it's not that big of a deal if you don't want to get them right that instant, like if you haven't decided on what amps you want your circuits to be, because each breaker goes to a circuit, and I'll talk about all of that in a different video. Right now we're just trying to get our mind around the difference between AC and DC. That being said, I hope I've covered everything. If you have any questions about AC versus DC, you can leave those down in the comments below. I'm going to film this brief disclaimer, which will probably be at the end or beginning of all of my videos. I get all of my electrical knowledge from my dad and my papaw. Now my dad's dad, which is my other grandparent, not the papaw I talk about all the time, is an electrician, and he's like a certified electrician in Tennessee. So if that's anything like Tennessee drivers, I'm apologizing to all of you guys in advance. But that being said, like everyone comes to a consensus on most things, and my stepdad is also a carpenter who knows a little bit about electrical, and so I just gather and absorb from everyone. Also, Skoolie Wagon had a very informative and helpful article to help me understand different various aspects when I was going into looking about solar things, so I will always leave that link in the description below for these electrical videos. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Again, leave questions or topics you want me to talk about, and I will try my best to talk about them to be a little bit helpful, because sometimes it's more helpful saying it out loud, explaining it, showing it, than, reading.